Welcome to Scream Therapy. I'm your host, Jason Schreurs. In October of 2018, I found myself in the hospital, sitting across from a psychiatrist who was telling me I had bipolar. I was sent home with a bunch of medication and laid on the couch for a week. I had my iTunes library on shuffle, trying to shake the hornet's nest from my head. Ever since I was a kid, I've been using loud music as a form of therapy. Punk rock and mental health have always been connected. This podcast looks at that connection through the lens of different guests. This is Scream Therapy.
What's inside that I should find? I sit between failure and grief. What's outside? I'm scared to go. Disappointing life. Wait until I can take control over my own broken mind and choose to grow. Past the sadness, story makes. Take control over my own broken mind.
Losing a parent can come with a crushing grief full of guilt and regrets. Spite House singer and guitarist Max Lajoie lost his dad to suicide when he was 16. His formative years were shaken, and he found comfort in the punk music scene. 10 years later, Max lost another parent. His mom died suddenly from cancer, and grief pummeled him harder than ever. As a youth, Max's dad's death sent him into a spiral of self-doubt and existential crisis. In his late 20s, Max's mom's death was a wake-up call to be creative, including starting Spite House. Grief becomes a part of you. The question is not will it end, but what can you do with it?
I move to rest. It's full and grip. I push with the walls closing on me. I have to check anxiety. Worried about it's hard to take control and choose to grow.
So my name is Max Lajoie. I play guitar and sing in the band Spite House, and I'm also a music producer in Montreal. I started listening to punk rock when I was 8 years old. My dad bought me a guitar, and I was watching TV and just like fell in love with punk rock at the time through bands like pop punk, like Blink-182 and stuff like that. The whole band was made to help me process, the grief of my parents. I lost my dad when I was 16. He died from suicide. And 10 years after that, my mom died from cancer, like unexpected cancer. And it took 10 days for her to be gone.
So when you lost your dad when you were young, like formative years to be 16, and I'm assuming, still being into music, how did your dad's death affect you going forward from there?
There's many details to the story, but suicide doesn't just happen. It's a long life of depression that goes through waves. My parents separated around the time that I started listening to punk rock. I was like a teenager, and I moved back to my dad's house, and he realized that he wasn't like really fit to be a good parent at that time, and that really hit him hard. It affected me in a way like, music was my life when I was like 12 to 16, and I was going through like what you can call like a broken home. When I was 14, my dad forgot about the house was made like a second half of the house was sometimes rented to people, and he was cooking sometimes on that side because there was a fryer, and he fell asleep while the fryer was on, and so that whole side of the house burned. From then, the guilt of that happening really ate him. That's where like the more serious stuff like depression, like very deep, started. I remember it was the time like I was a teenager, and I was discovering like so many bands on MySpace and stuff like that. And really like the internet culture was kind of new back then. And I was just hiding in that world, soaking in all the new music, and kind of like playing a little bit too much of the role of a parent when I was at home. and trying to leave home as much as possible. It was like a weird build up and lead up to what happened, which it was something you could feel was going in the wrong direction, but I had no like power over it. And then it happened. It was my last year of high school because here in Quebec it's a bit different. When it happened, yeah, I was like taken care of by a psychologist, and she really helped me through it. That's what happened. And my goal after that was to move out of that city as fast as possible, which I did the year after, and moved to Montreal.
The feelings that must have come up around that, you mentioned feeling like you were parenting sometimes more than
Hmm.
he was. So after he died, what kind of things came up and how did that sort of affect your relationship with music?
Well, for me, it was like living through the depression of my dad for like many years and having it getting worse and worse. My only desire was to get out. So when it happened, it created like some mixed, weird feelings of not being happy, but like seeing this as an opportunity to get out, which created more feelings of guilt for feeling that way afterwards. Yeah, I was just focused on not living that life anymore. And it was a weird time where you're becoming an adult, you're moving out of this suburb that you've been living in and wanting to get out your whole life and entering like a new city that was very how would you say, like intimidating, because I didn't know anyone here. Everything was new to me, and I was entering like a new school program, and I had a really hard time that first year. Like I didn't make any friends, and I was like living all by myself in a studio apartment, but like for school. So I was very isolated, and that first year was like very rough. And also like my mom had all other sorts of issues, which was one of the reason I couldn't stay as well, because I couldn't live with her. She had like financial problems and all sorts of her own thing.
Living in Montreal and it being such a huge city and like you said, a bit intimidating and trying to find people to connect with and maybe finding your things that you're interested in. Were you able to get into the music scene in Montreal? Because Montreal has a huge music scene.
Yeah, so the fake goal of coming to Montreal was to study jazz guitar. So I applied to a program, a really good program in Montreal, and I was not accepted. I was denied entry. There was something like 150 guitar players, and they were taking like 15 or 20, and I didn't know anything about jazz, but I knew how to play guitar. In my mind of like a young teenager, I was like very good, especially for my town. There wasn't a lot of people that could play guitar like I could back then where I was. And then I entered Montreal and I saw like that everyone was better than me. So I was denied entry, but I was still in Montreal, and the goal was just to live a life in Montreal at that point. So I started like studying writing, and I hated that. I did that for like 1 year, and people were like very unwelcoming to someone that is not already in that world. After 1 year of doing that, I was able to enroll into a sound recording program. And that's where I met like friends I still have today, and also like the drummer of Spite House. From that second year, I met people that were into the same kind of music I was, and we started like going to many shows every week. Montreal is crazy, especially right now, but even back then, it was like you could see like 2 or 3 punk shows every week if you wanted.
Wow.
And I was living in an area like that was walkable to the venues. It was like the opposite of the first year. I was still shy and like very reserved as a person, but I was also like meeting people. And the first year I still went to shows, but like hardcore shows, and I was just alone, and I didn't really meet people. I'm a very like introvert person, which I really worked on in these past years, especially like fronting a band and all that.
When you go to a punk show, I always notice there's two kinds of people. There's ones that are dancing, they're super social and talking to people, and there's the folks that
Hmm.
are kind of in the back of the room, taking it all in, absorbing everything. And I think that's one of the really cool things about punk rock and the music scene is because there's room for everybody there, and it's
Hmm.
not like you have to be a certain personality to be part of it, and it all works off of each other.
Yeah, it's like I didn't go to the shows for the social aspect of it. I just went for the music and the feeling I was getting watching those bands be aggressive and be in your face and all that.
And you can go and just do that. There's no pressure
Yeah,
to have to talk to anybody or
yeah, exactly. You're not weird for like not exactly like participating and
yeah.
just being there in the room is fine.
Whereas if you go to a dance club, if you're just standing in the back, you're like a weirdo that's not accepted, right?
Right, right.
So what was your relationship with your mom like when you were in Montreal and through those years? You mentioned that it was troubled when you were back home, but were you able to connect with her and stay in touch?
We had a good relationship. It was so complicated with the feeling she had of like being, not a good parent and not being able to like help me out as much as she wanted. Like she dealt with her issues and I understood that she had her issues, and that was kind of clear that I didn't hate her for it or anything. It was accepted that she had issues to work on, but also it was something that maybe she wasn't able to deal with. I know for a fact that she felt a tremendous amount of guilt with what happened with my dad.
Hmm.
And she also felt like me moving out and changing cities and all of that, it was a hard for her. It's always hard for a parent to see like a child leave, but it's like there's a lot of layers of weird stuff happening that needs to be discussed with a professional, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And she didn't have the tools to do that, but we were still talking like, at first probably once every 2 weeks on the phone, and I was visiting maybe twice or three times per year. When I moved to Montreal, I didn't have a car or a license, so it was hard for me to bounce, back and forth between like my old world and the new world, but it was also almost like an excuse.
So when you were 16, you lost your dad, and then
Hmm.
10 years later, your mom. So you've been through different kinds of grief.
Hmm.
First of all, maybe tell us what happened with your mom.
She liked to be by herself. She didn't have like too many friends, and she has like a really good character, but she was like a heavy smoker as well. And just one day she called me, and she had lost like a lot of weight in the recent years, and she had like a lot of health issues her whole life. She had arthritis and lupus, which is like a condition that affects the lungs, but there's like two types, and there's one that's like invisible, and they could never really diagnose what she had, but she always had issues, and she wasn't working. It had been like 10 years since she was like on a health break. One day she called me and she's like, yeah, I'm in the hospital, and they say I have cancer. You should probably come over to talk to the doctors. And so I did that. One of our friends let us borrow a car and we went there. I spoke with the doctor and the doctor said like, yeah, it's not good. There's weeks maybe. And it took 10 days, and
Hmm.
she had lung cancer that had spread in her bones and everywhere, basically in her liver. The reason why she went to the hospital was because she was physically yellow. Her skin was yellow, so that's pretty alarming. They found like tumors in her liver and the lungs and the bones. It was already like way, 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 way past any hope for treatments.
So what was it like spending those last days with her in the hospital?
Well, it was hard. It was very, very sad moment. It was also the only positive I can think of is that not everybody has the chance to say goodbye and have the conversation about everything that needs to be said, which I had the chance of doing. The first few days she could talk, and then the last few days she couldn't. So it was like we knew the direction it was going. We knew that it was a matter of days. I was there with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend's parents are also from the same area, so they were helping out. I mean, emotionally, it was a feeling of like, here we go again. Some of my friends were coming to visit at the hospital, and they were like, second parent, what's going on? It was a very rough time. I was there till the very end. The last night I slept next to her, and in the morning she left holding my hand. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Losing your dad when you're 16 and being in formative years, and then also, losing your mom when you're in your late 20s and her passing away in a very different way.
hmm
Obviously feeling grief about those two things, I would imagine quite different.
Yeah, it's different. It's a different parent. It's a different relationship that you lose. It's a different context. With my dad, it almost like I could see it coming and felt powerless about it. And in the same way I did with my mom, but it was like, I don't know how to say, it was like so out of my hands. With my dad, I felt like I had a responsibility and like that I could save him somehow. And with my mom, it was like there was nothing to do about it. It created like with my dad, like this kind of like blur of what am I doing? Who am I? I'm just gonna hold on to music. And with my mom, it was like, okay, so like life is really short and you can get a call and 10 days later you're dead. So it was like more of a wake up call for my own life. Stop just drifting in life. Stop living in fear of what other people will think. Losing my dad at that age created a lot of self-doubt, and losing my mom undid that in a certain way, like if I think about it, because it made me realize you don't need to wait for another tragic event to start doing the stuff that you want in life. And for me, it was like being in a band. It was such an important part of my life, like music in general, and something that I admired so much. When I saw a band that really moved me, that I was so scared of trying it and not doing it justice. That all went out the window with my mom dying. I called my friend Mark and I was like, yo, I have song ideas. Can we just see what comes out of it? Through also recording bands, I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of bands that I record, like the musicians in those bands, I can do better than them. So why am I stopping myself?
So you said bands that inspired you and you were a bit hesitant to do it because you weren't sure, and then that leap of faith. But what were those bands that you were looking up at it before you did start your own?
When I was like 14, I was really into like heavy stuff, like metalcore and like hardcore and stuff like that. And then it became like uncool at a certain point where I was like, okay, bands like that are not what I want. And I started listening to bands more like post-hardcore, like Avart or Verse, Defeater, those kind of bands. And then that kind of opened the gate, the older versions of those bands. And then when I came to Montreal, I started like really listen to like emo music, and Jawbreaker was like very important for me. I was seeing like the new wave of those bands also happening, like Tiger's Jaw, Title Fight. Spite House is compared a lot to Title Fight, which is a compliment in my opinion. And just like bands that go hard on stage and they really feel sincere. For Spite House, the goal was to like go back to post-hardcore in the 90s, and we always name bands like Seaweed, Small Brown Bike, Sam I Am. We always, we love Sam I Am.
Those are great bands.
Hot Water Music as well. Like in the mid 2000, there was like a lot of bands sounding like Hot Water Music with like the gruff vocals, but No Division is one of my favorite records. the idea was to combine all those bands and make something just sincere.
I like what you said earlier about how the grief that you're feeling after your dad's death and through those years was in some ways kind of undone by when your mom died because they're such different types of grief. And
Hmm.
what the process looks like, it's not going to ever end.
Hmm. Well, that's what the album tries to address, like the new album. It's a bit of what we're doing right now, which is like revisiting all that time period and what I think it did to me, like with a different perspective on it. The album starts and it's when I learned the news about my dad at school and how I felt with people looking at me and like knowing that they knew, but they had to act as if they didn't know and stuff like that. And then the single that's called Desert is about when I stepped into my house for the first time after my dad passed, which was like a couple hours after, but just seeing how the house was different in a way that was hard to describe.
I stood by the door, couldn't get in there. Held you tight and said, I need to be alone. Cross the line of mass, enter the house, full of memories.
When you start the record and it goes through the evolution of my grief, and at the end of it, it asks a question, and it's like, will I ever heal completely? And I think the answer is no, because grief becomes a part of you. It breaks you, it changes you, and sometimes you have to like address what it did to you and try to find a way to not have it completely define you. But it's also like what I lived through with my mom. It was like the cycle starts again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, it's been 10 years, you're past it, and then something else happens, and then you have another realization that it's been 10 years, but it still affects you in a way that you didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cycle starts again, and it's like, will it ever end? And the answer, I think, is probably no, but also there's ways to deal with it that keeps you more of a functioning human being. That's creating music and talking about it. Like I don't think I'll ever write about it again as straightforward as it is on the last record. But yeah, it kind of answered like how to deal with difficult things in life. And for me, the answer is by creativity, by expressing yourself, whether it's at a hardcore show or creating music with your friends or recording music or writing about it.
Are you finding it tough to have to relive all of the tragedies that have happened in your life? And you're going to probably be doing a bunch of interviews for the album as well.
Yes and no. Like when I was feeling the way I was feeling, all I could latch on was bands that were talking about difficult stuff that they lived or that maybe they didn't live, but they were writing about it. The goal was really to put something out there for me 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like my story is out there and people will live other difficult stuff and they will know that they're not alone.
That was my conversation with Max Lajoie of Spite House, spitehousemtl.bandcamp.com. For more episodes of Screen Therapy, go to screentherapyhq.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Big news, the Screen Therapy book is available now. Screen Therapy, A Punk Journey Through Mental Health, tells my story and the stories of others who use punk as a catalyst for mental health. Like this podcast, it links the community-minded punk scene with the mental wellness of the punks who belong to it. To order the book, go to screamtherapyhq.com. For merch, check out screamtherapy.threadless.com. Okay, enough promoting. It's time for some thanking. Thank you for listening to Scream Therapy. Doing this podcast and talking to folks about punk rock and mental health has been a crucial part of my own mental stability, and it means so much to me that you're out there listening. Scream Therapy is created in the Cathet region of coastal British Columbia, Canada, on the traditional territory of the Clahaman Nation. Contact me at screamtherapyhq.com or email me at screamtherapypodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Let's talk about punk rock and mental health. Until next time, take care and be well.